stepped outside this morning, or maybe you stood at the window first, and the yard was already going. Cardinal near the back fence, chickadees in the maple, the low rolling alarm of a robin somewhere past the holly bush. And you probably thought, birds, morning birds, background noise. I thought the same thing for a long time. I do still stand at the window with coffee. Every morning I can manage it. I've been doing it for about 5 years now, since my wife and I moved to this little house in Northern Virginia. And for the first 2 of those years, I heard birdsong. Music, more or less. Nice to have. What I hear now is different. By the time you registered the first call this morning, those birds had already been running a communication network for hours, not metaphorically, not loosely, not in the way we sometimes say animals communicate when we mean they make sounds that seem meaningful. An actual structured system, with syntax, with layers, with specific roles, and with information precise enough that researchers at Cornell Lab of Ornithology and the University of Washington have spent decades trying to decode it. Welcome. If you're new here, subscribe before you go. I cover what's actually happening in suburban backyards and what it means to pay attention to it. Today we're going through 7 alarm calls you hear every day in your backyard and what each one is actually warning you about. Stay until number 7, because number 7 isn't an alarm at all. And it's the one I think about most. Let's start at the beginning. Number 1. The chickadee is speaking in sentences. Most people hear the black-capped chickadee, and they hear a pleasant small bird with a call that sounds like its name. Chickadee, 2 syllables and then some extras at the end. Cheerful, consistent, easy to like. Here's what those extras actually mean. The data on this, heavily studied by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, shows that the D notes, the repeated syllables at the end of the call, are not decoration. They carry information. The number of D notes tells every bird in earshot exactly how dangerous the threat is. 2 D notes. Low threat. Something is present but manageable. A large hawk that isn't particularly maneuverable might rate a 2 or a 3. 4 D notes. Elevated threat. A cat has entered the yard. A Cooper's hawk has landed in the canopy. 5, 6, 7 D notes. Maximum alarm. This is the call the chickadee pair that I've been watching for 4 winters. I think of them as the Tuesday couple because they show up at the tube feeder every Tuesday morning at almost the same hour. Without fail, this is the call they give when they spot an eastern screech owl in the oak at the back of my yard. An eastern screech owl is fast and built specifically to hunt birds their size. And the chickadees, 11 grams, the weight of 2 pennies. They treat it like a 5-alarm emergency because they're right to. The research has also shown that this grammar is not private to chickadees. Tufted titmice, white-breasted nuthatches, blue jays, they all recognize chickadee alarm syntax. They respond proportionately to the D count. A 2D call gets mild attention. A 5D call clears the yard. The next time you hear a chickadee cycling through D notes and not stopping, count them. Then look for whatever that 11-gram bird just classified as an existential threat. Number 2. The alarm designed so the predator can't find the caller. There is a sound your yard makes when a hawk is directly overhead, not approaching, not nearby, but directly above, actively hunting. You may have heard it and not registered it as a call at all. It's thin, high. It barely qualifies as sound. That's not an accident. This call, researchers call it the seat call, though it has variations across species, is produced at around 8 kilohertz. That frequency is nearly impossible to locate acoustically. The hawk directly above cannot triangulate where the call is coming from. The physics of sound work against it. Several species in the eastern United States produce this call. The tufted titmouse, the white-breasted nuthatch, and the black-capped chickadee. Each species has its own variation. Each conveys the same information. Raptor, directly above. Do not move. Do not draw attention. Work coming out of the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology has documented how the acoustic design of these calls sits in a narrow frequency range where information transmission and predator confusion overlap. These birds found, over millions of years of dying when they got it wrong, the exact frequency that warns their neighbors without giving themselves away. Pay attention to this. When the yard goes thin and still, not silent, but thin, like the sound is pulling back, look up. Something is directly above you. The small birds have already made their decision. Number 3. The blue jay is not just being loud. There is a persistent idea about blue jays, and I held it for at least the first 2 years of paying attention, that they are noise. Big, brash, aggressive at feeders. I thought of them as the loud ones, and I mostly tuned them out. Here's where it gets significantly more complicated. The blue jay, 70 to 100 grams, 7 or 8 times the weight of a chickadee, is one of the most important alarm broadcasters in eastern North American habitat. When a blue jay calls out a Cooper's hawk, every songbird in range takes notice. Not because the jay is large, because the jay is trusted. Decades of research from Cornell Lab has tracked how bird species respond to alarm callers across species, and the jay sits near the top of the credibility hierarchy for aerial and perched predator alerts. A concept called heterospecific eavesdropping, birds listening to and acting on the alarm calls of other species as reliable information, shows that more than 40 species in North America actively monitor calls from outside their own. The blue jay's broadcast is, for most of those species, among the most reliable signals available. And then there's this. Blue jays can mimic the calls of red-tailed hawks and Cooper's hawks with enough fidelity to trigger alarm responses in other birds. Researchers are still working out whether jays do this deliberately to clear feeders. I'm not going to tell you they do. I'm not going to tell you they don't. What I can tell you is this. The next time you hear a hawk from the canopy, look up and only see a blue jay. You didn't mishear it. It was the jay. The next time a blue jay starts calling from the fence and won't quit, don't close the window. Something in that bird's read of the area triggered the broadcast. You may never see what it was. But the chickadees noticed. The nuthatches noticed. The yard adjusted around that call before you looked up from your coffee. Number 4. The alarm you set off this morning and didn't notice. I want to be honest about this one because it's the hardest one to talk about without making you feel like I'm accusing you of something. I'm not. I made this mistake for years. I thought I was a neutral presence in my yard. I refilled feeders. I sat on the back step. I moved slowly and quietly, more or less. I assumed the birds were used to me, indifferent at minimum. I was not a threat. I was just the person with the seed. I was not a neutral presence. I was a variable. The research on this comes out of the University of Washington, from the same lab that documented crows recognizing and responding differently to individual human faces over years. Their work, and the research built on it since, has shown that backyard songbirds develop individual assessments of specific people, not humans as a category. Individual people. And each person carries something researchers call a flight initiation distance, the gap at which that bird decides to flush from you specifically, not from humans generally, from you. Your flight initiation distance with the birds in your yard is not 0. It is probably not the same as your neighbor's, and it is not fixed. Back in 2022, I found a fledgling under the Japanese maple. It looked stranded. I picked it up and moved it to a higher branch. I thought I was helping. The Tuesday couple, who I believe shared territory with the fledgling's parents in my yard's chickadee population, saw what I did. For 3 months after that, the feeder near that maple sat close to empty during the hours I was outside. Not at night, not when I watched from the kitchen window, specifically during the windows when I was in the yard. I can't tell you they were holding it against me in any meaningful sense. I can tell you that the research supports exactly this kind of threat-associated information spreading through a local bird population, and that for 3 months I had been entered into my own yard's alarm system as the threat. Here's what I want you to take from this. You don't need to feel terrible. I felt terrible for weeks, and it helped no one. What helps is what comes next. You back off. You move predictably. You stop reaching for things you don't fully understand. You sit at the window, and you let the birds revise their read of you at their pace, not yours. The Tuesday couple came back. It took about 6 months. They're at the feeder now. Number 5. The American robin has 2 completely different alarm systems, Navin, and they tell you exactly what kind of threat is approaching. Most people know the robin's alarm, that sharp, rapid tut, tut, tut that cuts across the yard, repeated, insistent. The robin doesn't hide this call. It stays visible and keeps going. If you've ever been startled by it from the far side of the yard on an otherwise quiet morning, you know the one I mean. That call is for ground threats, cats, raccoons, squirrels that are moving in a way that trips the robin's assessment. The call is loud and locatable because the robin is doing 2 things at once, warning other birds and announcing to the predator directly that it has been seen. Behavioral research on this type of signaling tells us something fascinating. Many predators depend on surprise, and once surprise is gone, they often move on. The robin is not just reacting, it's negotiating. But the robin has a second alarm, and it sounds almost nothing like the first. When an aerial predator appears, a Cooper's hawk dropping through the canopy, a sharp-shinned hawk on a hunting pass, the robin switches to a single thin descending note. Once, then it drops into cover and goes still. Not drops as in falls, drops as in goes completely motionless, low, in the densest brush it can reach. And every bird in earshot that recognized that note does the same. I watched this happen one morning in late October, at maybe 6:47, from the kitchen window. The yard was full, chickadees at the tube feeder, a nuthatch on the sweat cage, the Tuesday couple at the near feeder. The robin gave that thin note once, and the yard froze. I didn't spot the Cooper's hawk until it cleared the far fence, already gone, maybe 15 feet up. The whole thing lasted 4 seconds. The yard stayed frozen for 2 minutes after. 2 systems. One for what's on the ground, one for what's in the sky. If you know which alarm the robin is using, you know which direction to look before you've seen anything yourself. Number 6. When a predator settles in, something happens in your yard that I still don't have entirely clean language for. The yard reorganizes. Mobbing, the coordinated multi-species response to a perched or visible predator, is one of the better documented behaviors in behavioral ornithology and one of the stranger things to watch from a kitchen window. When the Cooper's hawk lands in the oak at the back of my yard, it does this a few times a week, what I believe is the same bird based on the timing and approach pattern. What follows is not chaos. It is organized. The blue jays go first, loud, direct, close. Then the chickadees, in a tighter orbit, calling continuously. A group of 3 or 4 American crows I've been watching for about 3 years. I call them the Hatfields after the feuding family, because they seem to approach every situation like it's a personal grudge. They come in from wherever they were and mob from a wider angle. Nuthatches and titmice work in from the tree line. At peak, I've counted birds from 6 or 7 different species in what is, by any reasonable description, a coordinated harassment campaign. When biologists finally mapped out this cross-species mobbing, work that made it into current biology recently, they found that the calls used during mobbing carry structural information that standard alarm calls don't. Information about predator direction, size, and whether the threat is stationary or moving. Birds joining a mob are not just reacting to noise, they're reading an ongoing briefing and finding their role in it. There's something worth sitting with in that. The yard you look at every morning, individual birds at individual feeders, each going about its day, has a cooperative infrastructure that activates the moment a predator holds position. No vote, no planning. The roles emerge from the calls themselves. 15 birds from 6 species in a pattern that looks designed, produced entirely by the alarm grammar of the birds who arrived first. I've watched this 40 or 50 times now. I still stop what I'm doing every time. Number 7. I've saved this one for last because it has to be last. There is a sound your birds make that is not an alarm. Technically, it belongs in a different category. Researchers call it a contact call, a low-level social vocalization used to maintain proximity between paired or family-grouped birds. It doesn't carry threat information. It doesn't trigger responses in other species. By the strict definition of what we've been talking about today, it doesn't qualify. I'm including it here because of what it means. And I want to try to be honest about that without overclaiming something I can't verify. The contact call of a chickadee is a soft, gargling sound, not the chickadee alarm syntax, not the thin aerial seat, not the high-frequency agitation call from when a hawk is sitting in the oak, just a low, continuous murmur between two birds. A sound that, when you hear it, means the system is quiet. Nothing is wrong. Everyone is still here. At 7:14 on a Tuesday morning in late February, I know the time because I remember checking my phone and thinking I had maybe 10 minutes before the first call of the day. I was standing at the kitchen window with coffee, watching the Tuesday couple at the tube feeder. 4 winters. They had been coming every Tuesday at roughly that hour, and I had stopped being surprised by it, which is its own thing to notice. And they were making that sound to each other, not at me, not about the hawk that had been in the oak the previous afternoon, not about the cat that sometimes sits on the far fence, just at each other, across a few inches of cold air above the feeder, that gargling murmur back and forth for almost 2 minutes. The science says this is pair bond maintenance vocalization. That's accurate. What the science doesn't say, and I don't think can quite reach, is what it's like to be standing at a kitchen window on a difficult February morning and hear 2 small birds telling each other, quietly and without any drama, that they are still here. I'm not going to tell you it's a message. I'm not going to tell you it's not. What I can tell you is that I wasn't invited to hear it. They don't know I'm at the window. What I'm listening to, when the yard goes soft like that, is private. 2 birds, 11 grams each, telling each other one thing across the cold. I don't have great words for what that does to me, even now. What I know is that it's the sound that most often makes me put down my phone and just stand there, listening to something that isn't asking anything from me. So next time you stand at the window, there is a communication network running in your yard right now. It was running before you woke up this morning. It will run after you go inside. The birds in that yard, the ones you've walked past for months or years, the ones you've heard and not quite heard, have been broadcasting, decoding, and updating each other's information about everything in the area, including you. You're part of this system, whether you enrolled or not. The next time you hear the chickadees accelerate, 5D notes, 6, not stopping, you might count them and look for what they found. When the yard goes thin and still, you might look up before you look around. When the jays start calling from the maple and won't quit, you might give them a minute instead of reaching for the window latch. They've been running this for a long time. You're not late to it. You're just starting to listen. Has a bird's sound ever reached you on a morning when you needed it? Even if you can't explain why, I want to hear about it. I read everyone. I'll see you in the next one.